matched it. But let's talk about levels in terms of legacy and fights and career wins. A little fat kid from Mexico made him quit for fuck's sake. He spat his gum shield out and was looking around looking for the corner, looking for people in the crowd to help him out. He got punched from pillar to post. The referee's looking at him. Do you want to carry on? Do you want to keep fighting? And what's he done? He's quit on his feet. That is embarrassing. Something the Cobra would never ever do. And you can take that to the bank.
Anthony Joshua and Carl Froch over the last week have had back and forths. There's been beef there. And Carl Froch Anthony Joshua said things about Carl Froch. He said he was let's just say a word that you can get out of the name Peter and Rick, right? We'll use that. That's what Anthony Joshua said about Carl Froch. They've had back and forths over WhatsApp, over stuff like that. They've had their say. But Carl Froch, the video I basically put up at the start, the audio I put up at the start of this video, Carl Froch talking about Anthony Joshua getting beat up by, Andy Ruiz, the fat Mexican kid. And, having to go with Anthony Joshua, talking about legacy, saying that, basically inferring and insinuating that, actually just accusing Anthony Joshua more so, not even insinuating that Joshua quit against Andy Ruiz, which I don't feel he did. Do I think that he knew himself the end was nigh in that fight? Yeah, he definitely did. I mean, he kind of probably knew when he got up from the fourth knockdown of that fight that, look, the referee is probably, if he doesn't call it now, he's going to call it soon. So, the writing was on the wall. I'm sure he knew that. But if the referee had said box on, would Anthony Joshua have boxed on? Yeah, I'm sure he would have. Anthony Joshua hasn't shown any quit to me in his career, nor has Carl Froch during his career. Carl Froch I loved watching Carl Froch in his prime. I love watching him. He was one of the few fighters that I did know, even when I was a casual, I did know who Carl Froch was. And when I say casual, I mean I was really only getting into boxing at the time. I knew who Carl Froch was and I knew his fight. I remember his 2 fights with George Groves very well. At the time, I was really starting to get into boxing at the time. And I liked Carl Froch. I enjoyed watching him. I thought he was an absolute warrior. When he retired, originally when he became a pundit, I didn't really take the Carl Froch. I didn't think he brought really anything to the table in terms of, fighter insight. I thought the way he scored fight, he commentated with Sky for a while with Adam Smith, and he didn't really add anything to it. In fact, it was sometimes he just kind of blanked Carl Froch out because you really got the impression he didn't really know what he was looking for. And he was at the time a little bit, he was pro-Matchroom. He was definitely pro-Matchroom early on. But that kind of changed as he's kind of got older and started jumping from network to network, doing the more freelance thing. He seems to just really say what it comes to his mind. But if Carl Froch says something, more often than not, that that's his opinion. And I quite like that. I've watched a couple of his videos on his YouTube channel. Some of them are very good. Some of them you kind of do just want to watch one particular part of it. But I like Carl Froch now as a pundit. But when he talks about legacy, Anthony Joshua, and he's done this before, and it's quite interesting, Anthony Joshua, Carl Froch, I think the beef, a lot of people have said this, that the beef really did kind of, I say beef, but, Carl Froch seemed to really start having a bit of a go at Anthony Joshua when Anthony Joshua got rid of Rob McCracken. Now, obviously, Carl Froch was trained by Rob McCracken. Anthony Joshua spoke about Rob McCracken not teaching him this and that. And he left Rob McCracken following his first defeat to Alexander Usyk. And, for me, I thought that was actually the right decision by Anthony Joshua. If I had one critique about him getting rid of Rob McCracken in 2021, my only critique would have been, why didn't you do it a couple of years ago? In fact, I certainly on here, when I started this YouTube channel back in 2019, he hadn't taken a loss at the time. I was always saying, look, I'd like to see Joshua with someone new. Because Joshua was a lot younger then. He's not old, but you know what I mean? He was still in his 20s. He still had time to develop. He still had time to learn new things. That's not to say he can't do it now. He is a bit more long in the tooth, but you never know. He's with Ben Davison, seems to be going quite well. But I think he could have had a move and work with the likes of Derek James and Angel Garcia. I was going to say Angel Garcia. It was... I can't remember. Robert Garcia. I think he could have done that a lot earlier. He shouldn't have needed 2 losses in order to realise that he'd gone as far as he could go with McCracken and then move on. Now, Carl Froch was with McCracken his whole career, and there's obviously a good relationship there. And I think that really did play a role in how critical. Now, Carl Froch is critical to other fighters. It's not just Anthony Joshua. But I'll read this article here from Boxing Scene last year. And I want you to... I'm going to show some snippets of this article here and go back a couple of years, especially about the same fight that he's referring to. And I want to point a few things out here, right? This was on an interview he gave with Simon Jordan. Again, this was last year. This was actually June, almost a year, well, actually just over a year ago, June of 2023. He told up front with Simon Jordan that Anthony Joshua's boxing legacy is not even comparable with his own, that Joshua didn't listen to legendary trainer. That's a strong word, legendary trainer. I don't think Rob McCracken quite fits that mould before his fight with Alexander Usyk. Froch discusses Joshua's legacy as the former two-time heavyweight champion of the world and how it compares to his own. The Nottingham icon feels strongly that his accomplishments and level of competition is levels above Anthony Joshua. I don't think Anthony Joshua's legacy can compare with mine. You have to look at who you fought, what level you fought at, the timing of the people you fought, and how many unbeaten fighters you've beaten, Froch told William Hill. I want to go on. He talks about his fight with the likes of Jean Pascal and others. And I'll touch on that now briefly. But he says Anthony Joshua fought Charles Martin, who was a nobody. That was gifted his title. That was gifted his title. Some poor grammar there. That's literally what it says. That was gifted his title. Okay. An old Vladimir Klitschko, who had been sat on the sofa for the best part of 2 years, came out of retirement. Oh, well, I don't believe he came out of retirement. He wasn't retired at all in that, so you're incorrect there. He didn't retire. When did Vladimir Klitschko retire? He didn't. He didn't retire. He was actually the only reason why, and he wasn't on the shelf. Was it 2 years? No, it was just over a year. It was just over a year because he fought. Okay, albeit it was 2017 and he last fought in 2015, but it was the end. It was the back end of November 2015, and he fought Anthony Joshua April 2017, and he didn't come out of retirement. The only reason why it took so long was because the whole of 2016 he was chasing that rematch with Tyson Fury that never happened. No fault of Vladimir Klitschko's, I might add. No fault of Klitschko's. And then he eventually got his crack at Anthony Joshua. Where was the retirement? There was no retirement. He beat Joseph Parker and Alexander Povetkin. I'm not being funny. Joseph Parker isn't bad, but he's not an all-time heavyweight, and Povetkin wasn't bad, but was past his best. The record and the names just don't stack up. All right, I want to point something out here, right? So he's been critical of Anthony Joshua getting rid of Rob McCracken because Rob McCracken got him to 2 world title fights. Okay, you're saying he was gifted a world title though. So why does McCracken get the credit for bringing Joshua to a world title when at the same time you're saying Joshua was gifted that world title? And go back to 2016. I will read this article. April 2016, Carl Froch heaps praise on IBF champion Anthony Joshua. Carl Froch admitted that Joshua looked punch perfect and claimed the IBF title with a second round stoppage win over Charles Martin. I will go on to say, and this is what he says here, he was almost in first gear, like he needed to warm up, and it was almost too easy. You can't really criticise it because no one has done that to Charles Martin. Big difference there. And lastly, Carl Froch, you want to bring up legacy? Well, let's do it, right? Let's do it. Let's look. He says here, and I quote here: I beat Jermaine Taylor, Arthur Abraham, Mikael Kessler, Glenn Johnson, Andre Durrell in a very close fight, and I went on to beat George Groves, who was unbeaten and 10 years younger than me. Yes, and you look at Carl Froch's resume, it's great, but let's just dissect this a little bit. You know, you did beat Jermaine Taylor. You had to scrape that win in the last round. You had to scrape it, but you did. Jermaine Taylor was at his best at middleweight. You beat Andre Durrell. A lot of people felt that you lost that fight. That fight was in Nottingham of all places as well, and a lot of people felt Carl Froch lost that fight. You lost to Mikael Kessler. That was in 2010. Now, when did Mikael Kessler fight Joe Calzaghe? He fought him in 2007. Now, Joe Calzaghe fought 2 more fights after that, and they were both at light heavyweight. They were both against Hopkins, who did still have something left in him, and a faded over the hill Roy Jones, right? But they were his last 2 fights. They were up at light heavyweight. He really kind of cashed out after those fights. So Joe Calzaghe, near the end of his career, beat Mikael Kessler. And that was and listen, that win will be great because that was an undefeated 39-0 Mikael Kessler. Joe Calzaghe did a good job on him. Carl Froch lost to Mikael Kessler in the year 2010, right? He lost that fight. Then he beat Arthur Abraham. Arthur Abraham, for those who don't know, was a very, very good champion at 160 pounds. But at 168 pounds, yeah, he picked up I think he held the WBO title a couple of times at 168, but he really held it hostage over in Germany. And when he went to America to fight Zurdo Ramirez, he got completely outclassed. He lost every round against Zurdo Ramirez. And he beat Glenn Johnson. Glenn Johnson had 14 losses at the time, and it was a majority decision win for Carl Froch. He lost to Andre Ward, we already know about that. Beat Lucian Bute, who was unbeaten at the time, but Lucian Bute didn't go on to have a great career. Yes, Carl Froch does have a win over Mikhail Kessler. Remember what I said about Joe Calzaghe? He fought 2 more times after beating an undefeated 39-0 Mikhail Kessler. Mikhail Kessler will go on to beat Carl Froch. Carl Froch will go on to rematch Mikhail Kessler and beat him. That was a very competitive fight. If you've never seen Kessler versus Froch 2, it was a very competitive fight. Joe Calzaghe, further on in his career, beat a prime Mikhail Kessler more convincingly than Carl Froch beat an over-the-hill Mikhail Kessler. How over-the-hill was he? He retired after that. They're good names, but you got to put them in context. And you look at Anthony Joshua. He beat a Vladimir Klitschko, who was a long-reigning champion, and no, he was not retired. Carl Froch was not retired. He was chasing throughout 2016 Tyson Fury. It wasn't his fault the fight never happened. It was never Klitschko's fault. That's why he was inactive for that year. It wasn't 2 years. It wasn't that long. He beat Joseph Parker, who has since gone on to beat the likes of Deontay Wilder and Zhilei Zhang. That win's actually aged pretty damn well, I might add. He lost to Andy Ruiz, yes, but he avenged that. He lost to Alexander Usyk, who was arguably the greatest cruiserweight of all time, undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Beat the likes of Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. No real shame in that. Beat Alexander Povetkin, who was his mandatory and was very dangerous, who then went on to beat the likes of Dillian White. Alright, so still had some good wins in him. You know. Who else has Anthony Joshua fought? Oh, God almighty. I don't have his box rec open in front of me now, so I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. Beat the likes of Kubrat Pulev, who was his mandatory good heavyweight contender. A decent heavyweight contender, it's fair to say. I wouldn't say he was the best, but, a decent heavyweight contender. The Joseph Parker fight was a unification fight, so there you go. Joseph Parker was good enough to beat Andy Ruiz as well, and for him to pick up a world title. Was trying to fight Jarrell Miller. Fight didn't happen. No fault of Anthony Joshua. Jarrell Miller failed that test. Tried to fight Dillian White several times throughout his career in a rematch, but it didn't happen. None of them were Anthony Joshua's fault, I might add. The first time in 2019, don't know what really went on there, but I think you could put the blame more on Dillian White, and then definitely in 2023, you could put the blame solely on Dillian White. Anthony Joshua's resume is strong. Anthony Joshua tried to do what people like Tyson Fury claimed they were doing. Anthony Joshua tried to unify at every available opportunity. It wasn't his fault that Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury tried to freeze him out. Anthony Joshua fought his mandatories, and if a mandatory or whatever couldn't happen, he would fight whoever. He would fight a contender. But Anthony Joshua's resume is very good. And Carl Froch chucking things in that article there, and I know it's an older article, but still, to say Klitschko was retired, he wasn't retired. And you look at Carl Froch's resume again. A win over Kessler is very, very good, but he retired his next fight. Joe Calzaghe beat a prime Mikhail Kessler, way more convincing. Glenn Johnson had 14 losses at the time. Taylor was really, his best weight was middleweight, as was Arthur Abraham. And a lot of people felt like you lost the Andre Durrell fight. So there you go. So Carl Froch wants to talk about legacy. Well, there you go. I think a lot of people, when a fighter retires, they remember the wins, but they don't remember the context of them. Well, I watched a lot of Carl Froch fights. I remember them. And I should really do a review of Carl Froch's career, because it was an interesting career. I really should do a WTF on Carl Froch, because it was an interesting career. But yes, that's my thoughts on it. So Carl Froch, I do like some of his videos, but I think he's being overly harsh on Anthony Joshua in a lot of his criticism and saying, Joshua's legacy. Joshua's legacy is fine. And he may go on to add to it. He may pick up another world title. He may become a 3-time world champion, world heavyweight champion, which is some achievement. That is guaranteed to get him in the Hall of Fame as far as I'm concerned. So that's my thoughts on the whole situation and some of the things Carl Froch has been saying. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts, people. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Peace.